Mr. Hockey is a pre-service teacher who is about to begin his first professional experience placement. He's been allocated to a small school on the outskirts of Wollongong. Mr. Hockey is from a small coastal town on the south coast and has not had too much experience or work with students from differing cultural backgrounds or social classes. Mr. Hockey is super excited to start his first day and can't wait to get to know the students and begin his teaching journey. He's allocated on a Stage 1 Year 2 class. Mr. Hockey has felt confident and ready prior to his start date as he's developed a professional relationship with his supervising teacher and had discussions and received information about the academic background of the students. This helped in a better understanding of how he can support these students' learning. However, upon entering the school, Mr. Hockey's had several teachers approach him to warn him about the particular issues of individual students' behaviour within the class. Specifically, Mr. Hockey's supervising teacher has made very negative, opinionated comments about a student named Taylor. He described her as a student who is really tough to work with and crack, stating that she doesn't speak much, doesn't participate within the learning, and her parents care little about her education. She's also absent a lot of the time. Mr. Hockey was left with the negative preconceptions of this student and her ability to participate within the classroom, and her parents lacked to care for her education. Ultimately, when Mr. Hockey started teaching within 2C, he found it rather difficult to build a good rapport with Taylor, leaving him to agree with the comments made by his supervising teacher and other educators. Mr. Hockey was left with negative feelings about his experience and discussing this experience with other pre-service teachers online. Mr. Hockey then decided to reach out to Mr. Brooks, who offered him to have a meeting to discuss strategies to help the learning and the environment for Taylor. Mr. Hockey left so relieved once he had a deep conversation with Mr. Brooks about the ongoing themes that Taylor just displayed within the classroom. They were able to identify that his teaching practice was under the scope of deficit discourse. The opinion of other teachers had influenced and took over his own perceptions and values he originally had as a teacher, led him to perceive Taylor and the class in the way that he did. Ford addresses these views and actions that Mr. Hockey displayed towards his students, as he states discourse is the system of thoughts composed in ideas, attitudes and course of actions, beliefs and practices that shape reality by systematically constructing the subject and the world in which they speak. Research indicates that deficit discourse within an education's teaching practice is detrimental to students' academic success, as they are automatically perceived to be ill-prepared, where students are at the forefront of the blame, being labelled too hard to teach, rather than teachers' mindsets needing to shift to alter the way they teach to meet the needs of students to enhance their learning and development. Research further highlights that students whose families are considered diverse in terms of social class, ethnicity, language and culture are more vulnerable to falling into the victim of deficit discourse within the classroom, which is the case for Taylor, who is an Aboriginal student with English as a second language and whose family is considered low SES. Within the discussion, Mr. Brooks highlighted to Mr. Hockey that his preconceived beliefs and thoughts of Taylor lacked the drive, motivation, and enthusiasm he needed. Therefore, he placed Taylor into a box rather than spending the time to get to know her interests, her needs, and her likes, whereby he struggled to see the root cause of why Taylor was acting out and not joining in with the lessons. To ensure Mr. Hockey is able to build a positive relationship with Taylor, he decided to talk to her mother the next following day. They discussed Taylor's behaviour and they were able to get a greater understanding of Taylor's background and culture. Within this brief meeting, Mr. Hockey discovered that parents have recently separated and Taylor's mother had been working long, hard days to support the family. This resulted in Taylor having to stay at her grandparents' house majority of the week, which they lived far away from school, explaining why Taylor was absent sometimes. Due to the limited income, Taylor's mother mentioned that she didn't attend preschool and didn't have much experience of prior learning at home. Due to her consistently supporting the family, leaving Taylor at home or with her grandparents, therefore has led to Taylor's struggles with socialisation with peers and other adults such as Mr. Hockey. However, Taylor's mum mentioned that she regularly engaged within the family circle, where they often discussed their culture and traditional language to create and share stories. This conversation with Taylor's mother made Mr. Hockey realise the value and the depth of her virtual school bag. It indicated the crucial things Taylor already withheld at home. And within her family and friends from the world in which she lives, Taylor possesses so many unique experiences and cultural knowledge that not many other peers in her class withheld. As a result, Mr. Hockey realised and acknowledges that his teaching practices didn't cater for her needs, interests, and leaving her disengaged and acting out. This shift in Mr. Hockey's perception allowed him to implement new teaching experiences that underpin the interests of Taylor, ultimately leaving her engaged within the lessons. This included starting the day with the yarning circle, as well as incorporating activities for Taylor to work within a school set, like using images to depict a story. This is referred to as a turnaround pedagogy that regards the disruptive nature of deficit discourse and the outcomes of promoting equity. This pedagogy ensures all students have the potential and opportunity to achieve academic success regardless of their background due to developing a greater understanding of the student's virtual school bag and implementing appropriate pedagogies to overcome these barriers to include their interests and cater for their differing needs. This results in experiences that are significant to the learner, where Taylor's levels of understanding were valued and supported that not only resulted in her academic outcomes improving, but her engaging in the learning environment, as well as Mr. Hockey developing a strong, happy relationship with the student to identify deficit discourse, discovering Taylor's virtual school bag, and implementing turnaround pedagogy.